Watching Europe's energy crisis unfold and seeing a number of black swan events that have overtaken the world in just the last couple of years makes me think that one reason to have residence and citizenship is not just to protect myself from crazy governments, rising taxes, and dwindling freedoms, but also to make sure that I'm living in a place where I have access to the resources that I need to survive. And today I'm going to talk about the prospect of residence and citizenship for natural resources. I've been called a financial prepper because I have diversified baskets of money, not only in different asset classes, but different geographies around the world. And so whenever someone's freaked out about what's happening in one particular country or in one particular asset class, it doesn't really bother me because I'm prepared. But I've never really thought of myself as a prepper. And yet, given everything happening in the world right now, given the state of chaos that we live in, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about residence and citizenship portfolios from the perspective of where can I go to make sure I have access to the stuff that we all need to survive. And so if it's your first time here, my name's Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consulting firm that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. That means lowering your taxes, having a second passport, building your freedom, building your options. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. And for everybody, we host the world's biggest and best offshore conference called Nomad Capitalist Live. So a residence permit is something you can get generally by making an investment in a country, opening a bank account, buying a property, starting a business, hiring some people, in some cases just showing you have enough money, and they will give you either a temporary residence permit or in some cases directly a permanent residence permit, which means you can live there. Some countries require you to live there to keep the residence permit, many others don't. And so having a residence permit is a step above being a tourist to where you've identified a place that you'd be willing to go. I hold numerous residence permits around the world to where I don't really need to ask permission. I don't need to rely on getting a tourist visa. I don't need to limit myself to staying for the duration of my tourist visa. And if I had to go somewhere and stay long term, they wouldn't be kicking me out. Imagine something happens, war or famine or a food shortage or an energy crisis, and you need a place to go. Wouldn't it be nice to know where that place is? I own 6 properties that I live in around the world. And so if something happens in one of those countries, I can go to one of the other countries and I can escape. And so you could build multiple residence permits to where you have places to go. You can also have residence homes in those countries. Citizenship is something that you can get after years of holding a residence permit, sometimes by living in the country, sometimes not, or you can get citizenship directly by citizenship by investment. I've long said that Caribbean citizenship by investment programs, whereby you make a donation and you get citizenship in a matter of months with no need to move or travel to the country, is a good way to protect yourself from financial black swan events. Your country wants to go nuts with taxes, or they're going to try and keep you in, or whatever we can think up. You have a second passport just to get out and go somewhere. What I would suggest, and why I'm looking now at having multiple citizenships, I've done that myself for many years, but why I'm thinking other people should have multiple citizenships is, if you're successful, spending $100,000, $130,000 on citizenship to have a backup plan and just having it done, that's a good thing. Now you're financially covered. Now you've got options. Now your government doesn't own you. But you're probably not going to go to an island. Sure, you could be perhaps self-sufficient on an island and you could grow your own food and stuff like that. But let's talk about some of the main commodities, what you might want to be looking at in a place where you have a residence permit or a citizenship. I'm going to cover oil, gas, water, wheat, and fertilizer. Most of these covered by graphs from the wonderful website called Visual Capitalist. And so oil production by country. By the way, it's not lost to me that a lot of these numbers, the United States has pretty good numbers. Now, one thing I will point out here is the U.S. has some of the highest oil production in the world. Certainly also has a large number of people. And so you have some countries with big oil production and not as many people. And so potentially there's more good to actually help the people in the country. For example, I spend time in Malaysia. People complaining about high gas prices have not been to Malaysia, right? So you have lots of oil and gas, and you have a relatively small population, about 35 million people in Malaysia. And so the government provides that back to its people. It actually helps the people. And so you're not going to have that issue with oil. You're not going to have an issue filling up your tank if you live in Malaysia. Where do they have some of the most oil? US, Russia, Canada, Norway. No doubt, Russia's a low-tax country. Most people probably don't want to move there right now. So those are all primarily high-tax countries. Obviously, you've got the countries in the Gulf region, Saudi Arabia, UAE, both countries where you can get a residence permit. Saudi Arabia will sell you a permanent residence permit. You can live there for the rest of your life for about $213,000. Tax-free country to live, obviously plenty of oil. UAE, start a business, buy a property. They're opening up more ways to get residents there. And you can have the access to live there tax-free. For most folks, a bit more of a lively place to live. You're not going to be worried too much about oil if you are living there. Other countries, Indonesia, rolling out a new digital nomad visa, 5 years, no taxes. If you're there, you're not going to be a citizen, you're not even technically a resident, but you're going to have access. Now, the fact that they're a rather small producer of oil and they've got a huge population probably doesn't bode as well. We see Malaysia, Thailand next door. Larger population than Malaysia, produces less oil. But you could live there and you're not going to have as many worries. Egypt, probably not a place on most people's list, has a citizenship by investment program. That could be kind of an extreme, kind of weird diversification. Obviously, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, other countries like that, probably not top on your list. Colombia and Ecuador, Argentina, reasonably small populations, far away from it all. Ecuador is certainly small, possible to get residence in any of them very affordably, possible to buy property. Ecuador is more tax-friendly than the other two. So you've got tax-friendly countries on this list where you could get a residence permit and you could go there and pay zero taxes or pay very low taxes. You've also got countries where you could easily get residence, you could work towards citizenship, and you would have access to oil in your own country. Obviously, not everyone that's watching is from the United States, but if you're from the United States, ask yourself, all that oil, and how are your gas prices these days? So how is that going to help? Natural gas, U.S. again number 1, Russia number 2, then you've got Canada, Norway. Those are the big energy suppliers. Obviously Australia, lots of folks are leaving there. But again, we see Egypt, we see Malaysia, we see the UAE, we see Saudi Arabia producing natural gas. So again, you can get residence permits in those places. Generally speaking, other than Egypt, you're not going to be able to get to citizenship. By the way, we had someone recently who was married to a Norwegian citizen. If you lived in Norway for a period of time, you're going to pay a boatload in taxes, but you could get that citizenship. They do have dual citizenship now. And so that, if I'm going to pay high taxes, I would rather pay Norway. I'm not saying I agree with everything Norway does, but I do think Norway is a bit more earnest about their high taxes than the United States. And so if I had the option, you don't have to be a Norwegian citizen, by the way. He could just live in Norway with his wife. But that might not be the worst play if you're just trying to protect against some black swan event on an energy level. Hey, maybe you'd be willing to pay the taxes, but certainly options where you don't have to pay taxes where they have oil and gas. One thing I also think about is water. And so a country that I've talked about a lot, Georgia, you have like thousands of natural rivers, lots of clean water, very organic country. If you just drive a little bit outside of Tbilisi, you'll see the cow that's tonight's dinner. And so you don't really have that in a bigger country like the US. It's very organic. Which countries have a lot of fresh water? Brazil. Some of the largest freshwater reserves in the world. You can get residence there, and you can work towards citizenship in a matter of 4, 5, 6 years. If you marry a Brazilian, have a child in Brazil, adopt a child from Brazil, you can get citizenship in about a year plus a little bit of a waiting time. You need to live there, you need to pay some taxes. But Brazil, huge country, lots of resources, including fresh water. Russia, US, Canada, China, but also Colombia. For as relatively small as Colombia is on the map, to have the world's 6th largest renewable freshwater resources, that's pretty incredible. You buy a property there, you get permanent residence, you don't have to live there, but you have the option. Not the most tax-friendly place if you're living full-time, but you know what? If water's an issue, hey, I'd like to have access to plenty of fresh water. It is ahead of the European Union in terms of fresh water. The entire European Union, Colombia has more fresh water. Other countries, Peru, you can get a residence, although it's not always so straightforward. So you're seeing how South America, for example, could be an interesting place for resources. You've got wide open land. You've got lots of food you can grow. You've got more organic living. Parts of Eastern Europe could work. Parts of Southeast Asia and the Gulf could work, especially for energy. Let's talk about food. Let's talk about wheat. It's been in the news recently with what's happening in the Russia-Ukraine war. Which countries produce the most wheat? China. Right now, 17%, then India, then Russia. Probably not countries that you're going to move to. What's in one of the big, and then the US, 8.4%. What else stands out? Turkey, a country that people don't think about. When we talk about Turkish citizenship by investment, you can get citizenship in a matter of months by buying a property, putting money in the bank, or if you want to hire 50 people, you can do that. Turkey, big country, they manufacture stuff. They've been pushing to make a dramatic transformation. And if you live in Eastern Europe, a lot of the reasonably priced but quality goods that you're going to find are made in Turkey. It's better than stuff made in China, and it's cheaper and faster than stuff made in Italy. And they're also 3% of the world's wheat production, so you've got some protections. Now, obviously, you've had people talk about inflation there, but in terms of actual output of food products, Turkey is right up there. Other countries that you could live in. Brazil comes in again. Mexico comes in again as a producer. You can get a Mexican residence permit relatively affordably. Argentina, 2.1%. Again, a country that a lot of people don't think about, has certainly had some instability, but there's plenty of wide open land. We talked to Doug Casey at last year's Nomad Capitalist Live. He said, they look at me as a rich foreigner just to be left alone. And he's doing his own thing. So Argentina produces it. Again, Egypt comes in, probably not a country most people are going to think about, but you can get citizenship there. And you've got a number of countries, of course, in Europe, from Hungary, which is pushing back on the global minimum tax. You can get residence there. Poland, we've helped people get Polish citizenship by descent. Obviously, if you're a citizen of any European country, you can move to any of the other European countries. So if you can get citizenship in Europe through Malta citizenship program, through descent, if you have ancestry in any of the European countries, if you can get a residence permit and work towards citizenship, you're going to have access to all those European countries. And you see Germany, France, Poland, Romania, Italy, all on the list of places that produce wheat. Fertilizer, obviously also important. Again, Russia was in the news for that, and they're right up there. Belgium comes in pretty highly. Again, not the most tax-friendly place. There are actually some weird tax strategies that might help some people living in Belgium. And you can work towards Belgian citizenship if you learn the language. Belgium, Lithuania, you want to start a business, you want to make some investment, you can get residence in Lithuania. Germany, the Netherlands, Poland, again, all countries coming up on where they produce fertilizer. You can get residence in some of those countries. Morocco, interesting country that I think actually probably has some opportunities for very affordable living. You want to live in a villa by the sea. Morocco, I mean, they're way up there in terms of fertilizer. Obviously, the US, Canada, China, as always. We come back to Saudi Arabia, Egypt. So you see a lot of the same countries on the radar. By the way, Malaysia, $1 billion in fertilizer, basically 1/12 the output of Russia, for being a much, much, much smaller country. So you're seeing some of these same places coming up again and again. So what if you did this? What if you had a residence permit somewhere in Latin America? It sounds like, well, Mexico does come up on this, and Mexico's not a bad one to have. Some of the places in South America, whether it's Argentina, Ecuador, Colombia, could be a good place for resources. And in many cases, you could work towards citizenship there. What if you had something in Europe somewhere that could be in Eastern Europe if you prefer? But if you wanted more stability, maybe that's in the European Union. And you get some kind of golden visa, or you get a residence permit and live there, or you get citizenship in Malta in about 18 months, or you have a claim by descent. What if you did that? And then what if you got a residence permit somewhere in Asia, whether it was you did Saudi Arabia's PR program? Obviously, a lot of people have concerns about that, but it's an option. UAE, what if you started a company somewhere for whatever purpose? Even if it didn't reduce your taxes, even if it was just, hey, I'll pay the taxes living in Canada, but I have a company, and so now I can get my residence permit in the UAE. I go a couple times a year, I keep it active. Or you get a residence permit in Thailand or Malaysia, where you have smaller populations, and they have the resources in-house. So what if you got residence or citizenship in those three parts of the world, built a little portfolio, and then knew that no matter what happened, you had water, you had food, you had energy, and you were living in places that were a little bit further off the grid, that weren't in the headlines, that weren't Russia, that weren't China, that weren't the US, that weren't the UK. That would be a good strategy, to be not off the grid per se, but out of the mainstream places that are suffering these problems, out of the crosshairs. If you did that, I think you would be dramatically more prepared for whatever happened in the world. You could parlay that into a tax strategy, whether you want to live in different places, whether you want to live in some of those places that are tax-free or tax-friendly. So you've got a lot of options, not only protect your finances and your wealth and your business, but also protect yourself and your family. That's not a bad strategy, and I would look at putting a portfolio like that together if you're concerned about what's happening in the world.